One of the longest running plays on Broadway was Les Miserables, an adaptation of Victor Hugo's book of the same name. It gives us an insight into and condemns the social inequality of 19th century France. There are many parallels today in our own situation. The story involves a man named Jean Valjean who was arrested and jailed for stealing a loaf of bread to feed his family. He escapes from prison and is befriended by a bishop who assists him. Unfortunately, Jean steals a pair of silver candelabra from the bishop and is caught by the police. And when they bring him back to the bishop's house, the bishop tells the police that he has given them to him as a gift. And so begins Jean's conversion. Therein he starts to live a different kind of life and dedicates himself to taking care of others, especially the poor. The story is complicated, and yet it brings out a point that doing good for others can change a person. One of the most famous lines from the musical version is the song that Jean Valjean sings. To love another person is to see the face of God. Yes, because God is love. Today we celebrate Trinity Sunday. How important it is that we want to see God's face. We want to see that God has not one face but three in the Trinity, complicating this matter and mystery for us. But we recognize that the love of God is what joins these three persons together, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And that love enables us to see that God, who is Trinity of persons, united in a deep love for one another, is the heart of that mystery. And so it may be difficult to understand, but we do have some attempts in history to explain it. But the most simple one, perhaps, is that we understand a family where there is a father, a mother, and usually a child. And when we look at the persons of the Trinity, we can easily recognize the image of the Father, and yes, of the Son, also recognized to us as Jesus. The Holy Spirit, however, escapes us. In a certain sense, the Holy Spirit is the love that binds the Father and the Son together, and as some would say, brings a feminine quality to God that shows that love is the adoring and binding source of the community, of the Trinity, and of a family. In our situation today, we see many protesting the horrible death of George Floyd, and we recognize the anguish that comes from a deeper understanding of the inequalities that still exist in our society and the burden that people of color must bear. Unfortunately, the protests have been marred by violence and looting, and some who seek purposely to create anarchy in our society. Nothing is to be gained by this type of violence, and there is everything to be lost. Martin Luther King Jr., in his wonderful understanding of nonviolence, once said this: "Time is cluttered with the wreckage of communities which have surrendered to hatred and violence. For the salvation of our nation and the salvation of mankind, we must follow another way. This does not mean that we abandon our righteous efforts, but we shall not, in the process, relinquish our privilege and obligation to love. This is the only way to create beloved communities." The understanding of what is truly at stake can be lost when we see recriminations and fear. We must understand that societal change of the evil of racism must happen, and perhaps more rapidly than we thought in the past. Any incident today could spark these type of demonstrations, because they underlie the feelings of discrimination that so many people of color feel. 2 years ago, in the terrible wake of the Charlottesville demonstrations, I established a commission in our diocese to study the problem of racism within the church. Bishop Tiedemann is with me today celebrating, and Father Cox is with us, who was also the secretary of the commission. They had many hearings and worked for over a year to understand the issues. They had meetings with the priests of the diocese to help them understand how they could preach about racism. Also, they had meetings with our teachers in our Catholic schools, giving them curriculum so that they could make sure that our young people are not tainted with the same spirit of racism that we have seen in the past. There's much yet to be done. There are over 500 comments that they received in their work with the commission and the hearings they had, and they still must be prioritized, and we must tackle them one by one to see how we can deal with the feelings and the reality that racism have in our own church. Racism is a learned behavior. People are not born racist. Yes, it's picked up by attitudes and feelings and words, and we need to work to make sure within our church that we are trying to outroot any of these feelings or words or actions that might foment racism itself. The demonstrations we see certainly are not attended only by people of color. Many other young people of different races are there. Perhaps the tide has already turned, and our young people do not see things the way people saw it in the past. Let us return for a moment to the story of Jean Valjean. We see that there was another character prominent in the novel and in the musical named Javert, the policeman who pursued him. Javert prized himself as one who upheld the law and followed the rules. Unfortunately, we see in the current situation in Minneapolis that one policeman, allowed by three others, committed a horrible act that resulted in the death of George Floyd. We must have an understanding, yes, of the difficult job our police have today as they try to bring law and order to our society. But also we see, if they are restrained, that criminal elements have an opportunity to cause havoc in our society. We must understand the problem in perspective. We need to realize today that this Feast of the Trinity gives us a deeper understanding of the complex society in which we live, because as the Trinity is a mystery, so too is our society in its intricacies is also a mystery. The interaction between races, the interaction between law-abiding citizens and criminals, all of which remind us that we belong to a very complex society. Or as we see it in one church, our family of faith needs to assist one another. Only when we find the love of God and bring that love to others will things change. Our programs are important. However, the basic call is that we change, that we come as we celebrate this feast of the Blessed Trinity, that the love that is reflective of who God is and that makes Father, Son, and Holy Spirit Trinity is that inseparable love that we too must possess. Yes, as the song told us, when we love another person, we see the face of God, the Trinity.